So welcome back again for another video. So for today we will be installing Windows deployment services. So how you install the Windows deployment server depends on your server's OS. In Windows Server 2003 SP2, you open Control Panel, then add Remove Programs. Window Components WDS on a server where Server 2008 or 2008 R2 programs or server. You add it as a role through Server Manager by the following these 7 steps. So first, open Server Manager from the taskbar. Go to Start menu under Administrative Tools and click Roles. Next, click Add Roles to launch the Add Roles wizard. Next is on the Before You Begin page, click Next. The roles are listed on the Server Roles page. Then select the Windows Deployment Services checkbox and click Next. The overview of Windows Deployment Services page explains a little about Windows Deployment Server and provides links for configuring and managing Windows Deployment Services. Review the link or just click text. Next, the Select Role Service page lists 2 services that need to be installed for a domain-based WDS server. The Deployment Server and Transport Server checkboxes should already be selected, so accept the default selections and click Next. On the Confirm Installation Selections page, click Install. You'll see the installation successfully installed. Click Close and you're done. No reboot required. The newly installed WDS Snap-in is found in the Start menu under Administrative Tools, Windows Deployment Services. So before you can deploy images from your WDS server, you'll need to configure WDS. Open the WDS Snap-in, then expand the server's node, and you should see your WDS server's name. If your server's name doesn't appear, right-click the next server's node and choose Add Server. The local computer is selected by default, so clicking OK adds the local server to the WDS Snap-in. This is also how you can add multiple WDS servers to a single WDS. So snap-in so they can be remotely managed from a central location. To add a different WDS server instead of the local computer, right-click the next server's node and choose another computer. Then click Browse and navigate to the WDS server you'd like to add. So, step 2 on configuring Windows Deployment Service. Now that your server is listed under servers, notice the yellow yield sign next to your server's fully qualified domain name, or in short FQDN. Then configure the WDS by the following these steps. So first step is right click your server name and choose Configure Server to launch the Windows Deployment Services configuration wizard. The before you begin page list the requirements of a domain-based WDS server, click Next. On the Remote Installation folder location page, type a path where you'd like to store your images. This must be at NTFS partition. I recommend putting your images on a drive other than your system or boot drives, and you should have at least 20 gig of storage space. I always accept the default name of the folder, remote install, and change the drive letter, then click Next. The page display next depends on whether the DHCP service is installed on the same server. You're installing WDS clients, find both DHCP and the WDS services by broadcast traffic destined for port UDP67, which introduces 2 problems. Broadcast traffic is usually prevented from traversing one subnet to another, and DHCP and WDS installed on the same server can't both listen on port UDP67. This leads you to 3 scenarios: WDS and DHCP installed on the same servers, WDS and DHCP on different servers but the same subnet, and WDS and DHCP on different servers and different subnets. WDS and DHCP installed on the same server. WDS and DHCP can both listen on port UDP67. Then configuring WDS to not listen on UDP67 leaves the port available for DHCP traffic and setting. DHCP option 60 scope or server option to PXE client resolves this problem, and and if you're installing WDS on a DHCP server, the DHCP option 60 page appears during configuration. Then select Do not listen on port 67 and configure the HTTP option 60 to PXE client checkboxes. When a client receives another from the DHCP server, the offer will contain an IP address, subnet masks, and option 60, telling the client that the DHCP server is also a WDS server. If you add DHCP to a WDS server server. Later, you can configure this option by right-clicking your server name in the WDS snap in and choosing Properties. The DHCP tab has similar checkboxes. So, the PXC server initial setting page controls which client computers the server responds to. There are four options. Do not respond to any client computer's option is useful if you're not ready for the clients to deploy an image yet. Maybe you haven't finished adding your images to the WDS server. The respond only to known client computers option requires that you press stage your computer objects in Active Directory your users and computers or ADUC. For detailed steps, see the sidebar for staging a client. The respond to all client computers, known and unknown option is the least secure and by default allows any client that can connect to your network and authenticate to your domain the ability to deploy an image from your WDS server. Next is you'll see the task progress page and then the operation complete page by default the add images to the server now is option is selected. I like to clear these settings and add my images when I'm ready. So remove the check and click finish. You should now see a green arrow or next to your server name. Your WDS server is now configured. The next step is to add your images. There are two types of boot: Windows pre-installation environment or WinPE and install images. These are the OS images you'd like to deploy. Adding boot images. A boot image is the WinPE that you will boot your clients with to get them on the network and ready to deploy an install image. So within the WDS snap in, right click boot images and choose add boot image to launch the add image wizard. On the image files page, click browse and navigate to your Windows 7 boot Vim file, then click Next. On the image metadata page, accept the default image name and image descriptions and click Next. The summary page shows your selections. If everything looks good, click Next. If you need to make changes, click the back button. Make your changes and click Next again to get back to the summary page and click Next. The task progress page appears when it's done. Click Finish and your new boot image will be listed in the Details panel. Step 4 will be adding install images. The install image contains the OS you want to deploy. The supported OS to deploy are Windows 7, Windows Vista, Windows XP, Server 2008 R2, Server 2008, Server 2003 R2, and Server 2003. WDS support both Vim and BHDOS image formats. You can add a Microsoft OS image file or the Vim or one you've created. If you create your own Vim image using ImageX, be sure to use the plug switch to WDS knows which edition of the OS is in the image. The ImageX command syntax looks like this one that is flashed on your screen. To create an image of the C partition, name it new image, the Vim with a description of new Windows 7 image, and identify the OS as Ultimate Edition. The command is like this, the one you can see at your screen. Adding out a .vim installed image to WDS. In this example, I'm deploying a Windows 7 OS image file from the Windows 7 DVDs/sources folder. Its name installed.vim. Follow the steps to add your Windows 7 installed.vim to WDS. So we have 5 steps. So from within the WDS snap in, right click install image and choose and install image and pre-launch the add image wizard. On the image group page, accept the default create an image name image group 1 or type the new image group name. So yeah, you just read this And then the next step, on the image file page, click browse and navigate to your Windows 7 DVD sources folder or the ISO and double click install.wim. Then click next. The summary page shows the images that are contained in the install.wim. I'm using the retail DVDs install Vim, which contains Windows 7 Starter, Home Basic, Home Premium, Professional, and Ultimate editions. Then click next. The last step will be the task progress page appears because install images are normally much larger than boot images. This will take longer to add. When the installed image has been added, click finish. The new install image appears in the details panel. Adding a BHD image to WDS or Windows Deployment Server is by adding a BHD image is different than adding a WIM file. So in that case, it can be done within the WDS snap-in. You must use the WDS util command line utility to add a BHD. For example, if I have a BHD file named win7.bhd stored in the C images folder and want to add it to the WDS image group name by name my BHDs, you follow the steps that is flashed on your screen. Step 5 will be add drivers to your images. Drivers in WDS are by far the most complicated component. They're not well documented and are incredibly frustrating to figure out. I hope this step-by-step instructions is the WDS driver pain for you. So, um, I know there's a lot of information in this article with installation configuration and adding basic boot and installed images along with their drivers to the client deployment process for both known and unknown clients. I haven't even told you about multicasting transmissions and the advanced configuration options. Look for future articles that cover these and many more WDS topics. So thank you and see you on the next video.